Howdy y'all, and welcome to the first episode of Political Us, and a segment I call Context with Chris. In this segment, we'll take a look at how topics are related to one another. The goal is to show how highly connected one topic can be to another, and how some simple steps can make a big impact. Let's get started. Moderates. We don't matter. Now, hear me out because I believe we can matter. I consider myself a moderate. Most people, including you, are probably moderate. Well, sure you are. Have you ever said something like, I'm fiscally conservative but socially liberal? Moderate. How about, do you like the idea of universal health care or helping the poor, but you'd like to know the cost or impact to others? Moderate. Maybe you're just like to consider all the information before making a political decision. Moderate. If any of that sounds like you, or you're just sick of today's political nonsense, then you are a moderate, and we need to do better. Because right now, in the voting booth, we don't matter. But before getting into the details, first, I want you to watch this with something in mind. And that is the movie A Bug's Life. Towards the end of the movie, Flick finally figures out that grasshoppers only act big and tough because Hopper, their leader, knows the ants outnumber them 100 to 1. This couldn't be more true in American politics. Moderates, we're the ants. We just have to notice it. Here's the context. Well, with Chris. Let's begin at the end. Our vote doesn't matter in the voting booth. By the time we get to the presidency of the general elections, our moderate view has already been buried for months. Many moderates I know, and even reasonable voters in party lines, feel like they're voting between candidates that don't represent them. Or as South Park put it, between a giant douche and a turd sandwich. The reason for that is pretty simple and something many voters ignore: the primaries and voter registration. Time for some math. In the US, there are registered 32 million unaffiliated voters, or roughly 20% of all registered voters. Now, the actual number of moderate voters is going to be considerably higher, as some states do not have voters register their party, and voters within registered parties can have moderate views. A closer number is more like 100 million voters. It's not an exact number, but combining total votes of the highly contested 2016 Republican and the 2008 Democratic primaries, then comparing that total with total registered voters, you get roughly 100 million voters that fall somewhere in the middle, give or take for moderate leaning in a registered party. The great news, if you're a moderate, first, no more math from this point, and that 100 million moderate voters dwarfs both the right and left wings combined, just like in A Bug's Life. But even with those increased numbers, how do we end up with polarized candidates? Well, it starts with closed primaries. 25 states have either a closed or semi-closed primary, 26 if you include the District of Columbia. States have varying laws, but the general idea in those 25 states is that you can only vote in the primary of your registered affiliation. So, if you're either independent or unaffiliated, you have no vote in the presidential or congressional primaries. In those 25 states, there are over 26 million unaffiliated voters who automatically can't vote. And that's a big deal, but it gets worse. Because for most people, candidates have already dropped out by the time their state votes in a primary. 18 states have primaries through the first Super Tuesday. Of those 18 states, 7 have closed primaries. Now, why is that important? Going into the first Super Tuesday, we normally have the maximum number of candidates running for president, all with a wide range of what they think will work with voters. In 2016, there were 17 total candidates heading into the Republican primaries, and in 2020, the Democrats had 30 candidates. 1 week after voting concluded for the first Super Tuesday states, in 2016, 17 Republicans had evaporated to just 4. And in 2020, 30 Democrats had dwindled to a measly 3. From 17 Republicans to 4, and from 30 Democrats to 3. 40 candidates had been eliminated before most states had even had a chance to vote. But let's take a closer look at the 18 states that have primaries through the first Super Tuesday, because it's even sketchier from here. Only one, Virginia, is considered a swing state and has an open primary. One. The other 17 are either closed primaries or heavily favored to one political party. So when it comes to the primaries, if you don't live in Virginia, you never fully get a chance to select from the widest range of possible candidates. You're either blocked out because you don't associate with a party, or the field has already been narrowed by the time it gets to you. Which make sure to subscribe to the channel because Reasons for a National Primary Day is on the list. Okay, so we've talked about why moderate votes don't matter in the primaries, but surely the Republicans and Democrats value those sweet last-minute moderate votes to push them over for the win. Well, do they though? For the presidential race, there are 538 total electoral votes, and you need 270 to win. Based on historical party choices, Democrats already have 207 and Republicans already have 175. That only leaves about 12 of 50 states that can swing a candidate. Democrats can win the nominee with just Florida, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Republicans can win with those three plus Michigan and North Carolina. That's 5 of 50 states where an unaffiliated voter might matter. And don't celebrate moderates in Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, or North Carolina. You have a closed primary. So your fact-seeking, middle ground, both sides are at fault vote is only picking from what Democrats or Republicans picked for you. And Michigan, although you do have an open primary, you're after Super Tuesday, so you didn't get the full list either. But what about down ballot, where the local and state candidates are? That's where an unaffiliated voter matters, right? Well, information on local and state candidates can be much harder to access, and for many voters, especially those less involved with the political process, the information is either hard to find or overwhelming. According to studies reported on by Vox.com, roughly 30% of voters do not completely fill out their ballot. The theory is something that we've all done on a test at school. If you don't know the answer, leave it blank. Voters either leave it blank or vote straight down a party line. The name or viewpoints don't matter. They've got a D or an R next to their name, and that's all that counts. Now, there isn't data to support this, but who do you think is leaving the ballot blank? A right or left-wing party liner, or someone who is already disgusted with the entire process? Okay, so we've established that moderates don't generally impact the presidential elections, or the more local elections. But surely their opinion matters on a personal level among friends, family, and neighbors. Well, let's get real for a minute. I've spent the past 10 years getting into both in-person and online arguments with people trying to figure out what they know. And here's what I've learned. Moderates keep their mouths shut. If they do speak up, they come into a conversation, make some comment about both sides are guilty, try to weakly be a voice of reason, talk about how the issue is complicated, and then they bounce. It normally adds zero to the conversation, and then, when attacked from both sides, make some comment about, well, this is why I don't comment on social media, or everyone's opinion can be different. It's weak and pacifist. There's no passion from it like you would see from the left or the right wings. There's no influence to the conversation, and there's no attempt to back down either side. It's just there, like a parent that's going to count to 3, but never actually gets to 3, and their kids just keep acting like morons. And tell me, a bunch of kids acting like morons while the adults seem to have no control? Doesn't that sound exactly like our current political system? Here's what you're looking for, and we're back at our A Bug's Life example. How many people are actually engaged in the debate? Just a handful, right? The only way to sway politicians is to sway the people voting for them, and those voters are family, friends, neighbors, and coworkers. The average person on Facebook has between 200 to 350 friends, and only a handful care about healthcare, the economy, jobs, safety, or education? No, there are thoughtful, caring, moderate thinkers. They're just watching the show, and they feel like the content doesn't apply to them. They don't like the conflict. They're above the fighting and the pettiness of it all. But the reality is, moderates can believe they're above it, and will make an independent choice later. But the fact is, when you add not swaying voter opinions to not impacting local or federal elections, moderates, we just don't matter. But we can, and it's easy. You simply gotta play the game. First step, and the easiest, register for the Democrat or Republican Party, even if you're fortunate enough to live in an open primary state. It's also recommended registering with the party that you disagree with the most. Why? Well, first, in the voting booth, it doesn't really matter. You're not pledging an unbinding oath of unwavering allegiance. You're just adding a D or an R to your voter registration. Second, you have a stake in the game. You belong to a team and have a voice in it. Political rallies, communication, or meeting with elected officials, you're invited. Another reason to register for a party, if you're in a closed primary state, your vote can influence a primary, whether it's selecting the more moderate candidate or the one that's maybe just a better human being. That vote, even in a loss, influences the direction of the party. Next action for playing the game: follow all of your local, state, and federal political representatives on social media, even if you didn't vote for them. It's important to know what they're saying, who they're saying it to, and when they say it. It's how they're communicating to their constituents, and that matters when it comes time to vote. Seeing how someone regularly communicates gives you more information about their true personality and viewpoints. Do they regularly tell the truth? When giving a speech, is that normally how they respond, or is this speech written for them? Do they regularly misspell words or use half-coherent sentences? All things you only find out on social media. Now, when it comes to playing the political game, here's the one that's the hardest and hurts the most. The one that puts you in those awkward conversations with people you love the most. Engaging in the political conversation, both online and in person. I believe you don't talk politics or religion is completely wrong, and the person that came up with that phrase probably didn't have to worry about the internet. This one's just not easy. It's not easy to put yourself out there and potentially fight with your family or friends. People say and do insane things when their beliefs are in question. And I'm sure some of you are thinking, well, yeah, but why argue with them? It won't change their mind. They believe what they believe and it won't change. It's their opinion. And you know what? That's true. But here's why engaging in that online debate is important. There are plenty of other people reading the conversation. They may need more information to make or adjust their perspective. And with the credibility of the media and experts constantly under intense conspiracy theories, there's a large population right now that simply don't know who or what to trust. And you can be that person for them. You can say what they might have said or respond the way they might have responded. There are plenty of people who will actively avoid the confrontation. And because of that, the kids are constantly fighting. We need some adults to step in and count to 3. The last piece for the moderate guide on how to matter in politics is simply pick a stance. Being a moderate doesn't mean the middle ground. It means taking all the information into making a decision. Sure, the decisions we face are complicated, but at some point you've got to go into a voting booth and select a person or check yes or no. You've got to make a decision. And the same should go for conversations that you're having. Have those conversations with your stance in mind. Look to sway others or add additional information or perspectives. Have facts, have beliefs, and share them. And if someone brings up a point that can change your perspective, change your perspective. There's nothing wrong with that. The world needs more people willing to share and change their opinions. So ants, in this world where it feels like the grasshoppers are spiraling out of control, how do we rise up and get involved? Well, we register as either a Republican or a Democrat to be more involved in the voting process. We follow our political leaders on social media. We engage in the conversations. And most importantly, we make sure to pick a side. And with that context, you can make politics more about us. Thanks for making it to the end of the video, and I hope you found it informational. Please use your voting power to like this video, and your First Amendment right to leave a comment, and I guess your capitalism to click the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.